Shoobity beep bop, she bop a loop bop. 1-800-449-8255. And it's the Shark-a-doodle-doo, the Wolfman Jack on crack from the Golden EIB Sharkerphone. It's never a microphone, you guys. It's the Shark-a-lama ding-dong, baby. And have I got an album for all of you today, right here on the Clark the Shark Show. The fabulous, hypercritical, speculative, dynamically intricate, and balanced Clark the Shark Show. It's so amazing and incredible that I do the show actually with just half of my brain. I do everything half because I was born in 1965 in Torrance, California, with a disease called Bell's palsy. And when I was a little kid, they used to say, like, he's half a man or he's half a boy or half of this, half of that. And, it was a weird childhood growing up, being disrespected and hated. And I mean, I don't mean to bitch and whine because a lot of you out there are like, Shark, they used to pick on me too, bro. My life's, you're not the only one, dude. My life sucked. Believe me, dude. Your life's probably way better than Clark the Shark at 1-800-449-8255 on the fabulous, unbelievable Clark the Shark Show. And I think a lot of you out there are like, this fucking guy is telling the truth. Some people bait the hook with their heart, I'm not sure if I do that. That's there's a talk radio guy that says that. But I think you guys are like, dude, Clark the Shark just tells the truth, like, and it's so natural. It's just so ordinary or something. Like we gotta listen to Sharky, baby. And when he's talking about the Who live at Leeds, 1970, Shark's gonna tell you the truth, dude. That's what I do every time and all the time, right here on the Clark the Shark Show. I don't mess around, baby. Pete Townsend, Roger Daltrey, John Entwistle, Keith Moon, The Who, live at fucking Leeds. Dude, what an album. Now, let's frame this situation here. Let's talk about The Who. The Who sprang up out of, the scene in England in about 64. They were around a little bit in 63, maybe 62, just kicking around. And then one night they found Keith Moon in some club, and they literally, dude, took over the world right there. I mean, maybe at the time back in England and London or wherever they were jamming, maybe nobody really knew, or maybe a lot of people knew that right away when The Who got with Keith Moon, they became the greatest rock and roll band in the world. I mean, they blew away everybody. But, it took a while for The Who to kind of, get onto the sort of big time consciousness of a lot of rock and roll fans. But when they did My Generation, the song in 1965, that was like, dude, if that was the only song The Who ever recorded, The Who would be legends today. I mean, there were a lot of, one-hit wonders and bands that made one killer song. Kind of how the Count Five did Psychotic Reaction. I think of the Count Five as like legends today just for that one song. And, the Music Machine with Talk Talk. I mean, there's lots of bands like that. But of course, The Who would record not just My Generation. These guys would go on to just one amazing song after song after song, album after album, and the weirdest thing about The Who is in the 60s, I don't think they ever really captured the excellence of The Who on really any of their vinyls, As good as that first album is in 1965 that's produced by Shel Talmy, I think it could have been better. And I say that about all the Who albums. before Live at Leeds, even Tommy. I mean, all of the Who albums seemed rushed, underplayed, under-recorded, under-mixed. Something's just wrong with the Who, for 4 or 5 albums before Who's Next and Live at Leeds. When this album, Live at Leeds, came out in 1970, it was a shock because this sounded like Led Zeppelin or Deep Purple or some heavy hard rockin' metal band or something. It didn't sound anything like those Who albums before it. Nothing like those, you guys. I mean, when you heard Young Man Blues, from the old version of this album that I grew up with in Redondo Beach and Torrance in the South Bay, the Live at Leeds I knew before it got expanded later in the 1990s was just this album that had just like 5 songs on it. And for many, many years, that's what we knew of Live at Leeds, you guys. We just knew that killer, insane version of Young Man Blues. And then the chunky version of Substitute and, of course, the fucking amazing Magic Bus that they played. And the Substitute, fucking killer. Substitute and Summertime Blues. And then My Generation took up the whole, side 2, as I recall. And, and then the version of Shakin' All Over, which is so fucking killer. That's all we knew, you guys. We didn't know about all the stuff from Tommy and all the other shit that they later added, when they included the whole entire show. And when I heard that, I was like, what the fuck didn't they release this for? Why was Live at Leeds some bootleg looking, weirdo album that only had 5 or 6 songs on it? When I heard the expanded Live at Leeds by The Who, I think it was like 1994, 96 or something like that. I was pissed off, and let down because I was like, The Who should have released this long ago. And of course, this is way better than that Isle of Wight debacle where The Who, there's just something wrong with The Who at that gig. It's nowhere as good as Live at Leeds. And, Keith Moon just sounds off. And I can say that about most Who bootlegs. Usually the Who don't sound very good. It could be because they're not mic'd up well, and it's a bootleg. But I really think it's because Keith Moon is always drunk, and, the Who are just always relying on Keith Moon, to be good. And when he's having a bad night, the Who are having a bad night. You could say that about any band with a great drummer, or you could say that about the shittiest band, but if they have a great drummer, they're a great band. I think Phil Collins once said that. And if you're a great band, but you have a shitty drummer, well, then you're like a shitty band. The Beatles, with Ringo, got away with it because the Beatles, it seemed like they mic'd up the 3 guys up front with the harmonies, and they turned Ringo down and put him in the background or something because Ringo's just not that good of a drummer. I mean, Ringo's really solid at keeping a beat. I'd say he's more solid maybe than Charlie Watts. But let's be honest here. Ringo's not that much better than Pete Best. I don't know why they fired Pete Best in the Beatles. I mean, it was probably because he was good looking and all the birds were sleeping out in his garden, like Brian Epstein probably said. But we'll never know now what that version of the Beatles might have been. And by the way, I heard the Beatles audition for I think it was Decca. Before they got signed to EMI, they auditioned with many, many record labels. And one of them was recorded. I believe it was for Decca, where they got rejected by Decca. Decca's not that smart of a label. And the Pete Best drumming sounds just fine to me. They were smart to put Pete tucked into the background, but I have carefully analyzed that drumming, and it's not that bad. Pete would have cut it in the Beatles. I don't know why John Lennon and Paul, they're like, oh, he was a lousy drummer. Who's a lousy drummer, Clark? You don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, Sir Paul, you douchebag. He was good looking and girls liked him, and that's why you got rid of him. I admit, Pete Best probably wasn't the world's greatest drummer. but I don't buy this story. John's all, well, we were going to get rid of him in Liverpool, Hamburg, because he was lousy. Hey, John, did you ever think that Pete Best strung you guys along for 2 years? 2 fucking years where Pete Best and his mum, they drove the Beatles around and managed them. Even George knows that. Ringo's like, well, I got to admit, I'll sit here in the back. There's not much difference, between me and Pete. And Paul's like, no, he was a lousy drummer. And I'm like, Paul, fuck off, dude, you idiot. I mean, whatever. But sometimes I wonder if the Beatles could have even been greater with Pete Best. It makes me wonder, you guys, how much greater the Beatles could have been, but, we'll never know. But The Who, we all know what Keith Moon did for The Who. And then sometimes I'm also like, if Keith had took care of himself, kind of like Mickey Mantle, how good he could have been for the Yankees if he would have took care of himself. People think he might have hit 800 or 900 home runs. And that's how Keith Moon is. If Keith, just like John Bonham, too, from Zeppelin, if Keith would have maybe just drank half as much or did half as many pills, it makes you wonder, how great The Who could have been. But I'm going to be perfectly honest here. For 4 albums, studio albums, The Who really weren't getting anywhere, you guys, in the 60s. Their albums were interesting, The Who Sell Out and Tommy, but they didn't really capture that Who live thing. I Can See for Miles actually goes above and beyond, like the call of The Who or something. It's just awesome. And there are a few tracks, like The Kids Are All Right and others where The Who are just blowing your mind with how great they are, But I still come away always saying, what if Shel Talmy had produced the 4 Who albums? Because on the first album, Shel Talmy almost captures The Who, you guys, in 1965 with that album, My Generation, or The Who Sings My Generation, or whatever it's called. Shel Talmy does the best of any guy who produced and mixed The Who, for many years. And then on the second album, The Who are still kind of good because they're The Who, a quick one, it doesn't matter who's producing. It's interesting and good, but it could have been better, the Who second album. Now, as interesting as The Who Sell Out in 1967 is, and Tommy, they're both really great, artistic, interesting albums. I love them, you guys. I give them like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 for artistic merit, but they really don't capture the live Who. I mean, The Who were a powerful, loud, live band that were just explosive. And as great as The Who Sell Out is in 1967, it's got songs like Tattoo and Odorano and, just these mellow, kind of easy listening songs. And to a degree, Tommy is that way too. It's very acoustic. It's kind of soft rock. Keith Moon does his best to, kick its ass, and his insane drumming, tries to just make The Who great. And they damn near almost, and in fact do succeed. But I always wonder, what would those albums have been like if Kit Lambert had let Shel Talmy produce The Who, or someone else, who knows who. But The Who just weren't capturing The Who in the 60s the way they should have, pretty much on every album, even the one with Shel Talmy. Nevertheless, though, they were still real great at whatever it was they were doing in the studio. It was very interesting. Now, The Who live is totally different. Back in the 60s, The Who smashed their gear. Keith Moon wrecked his drums. They were very loud. They were often very sloppy and unprofessional, but that was The Who. They were explosive. They were blowing up bombs on stage. They were just the explosive band, and they had to do all that stuff, smashing things and giving these outrageous interviews and dressing outrageous. The Who knew what they were doing, or maybe Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp knew what they were doing. But the Who, for how mediocre they were in the studio, they were such an incredible band live that you didn't even care about their studio output. You bought a ticket to go see the Who, to go watch Keith Moon destroy his drums and Pete Townsend destroy his Stratocaster. That's why you went to see the Who. You went to see the power, the energy, and you didn't even care if they were good or bad. You just liked the fact that the Who were fucking loud as all fuck, and they were insane. And to this day, you guys, there really isn't any band in existence quite like the Who. Now, here in 1970, The Who would completely and abruptly change. This album suspiciously sounds better than The Who normally do, you guys, and I'm just going to tell it like it is. It could be because it's all mic'd up and it's all mixed properly. I definitely honor that theory. But on this night here, and for this whole entire gig, the Who are captured just sounding incredible. I mean, often it's way, way too good for the Who, you guys. And when you listen to this, you're like, well, this is as good as like Led Zeppelin 1 and 2, or like Deep Purple in rock, or anything by Jethro Tull, or anybody, or Black Sabbath, or of course it blows the Rolling Stones away, and this blows away the Who's own 4 or 5 albums before it, you guys. This don't sound like those. The Who are possessed on this album. They are on another level here, you guys, with Young Man Blues leading the way and all these other just fucking amazing songs. The Who are just incredible here. And this really is the debut album, you guys, for the Who. Let's be perfectly honest. This is where they took over the whole world. This album sold like 4 million copies. And there's no other Who album that did that, not even Tommy. And I think it's because hard rock and heavy metal fans really connected with the Who live at Leeds, you guys. They heard that version of Young Man Blues and Magic Bus and My Generation, and they were like, this fucking band rules. I don't even care if their studio albums suck. This one album is incredible. The Who live at Leeds. It totally changed the band, and it totally changed the bottom line of the Who. After this album, everybody got into the Who, you guys. And I don't even care. It's 5 stars. I don't care. Well, it does get 5 stars, you guys, everywhere. Nobody going to give this a 3 or a 4. Or, if they do, fuck it. I don't even care. But, the version of Young Man Blues, side 1 is pretty much intact from that original one, except for Shakin' All Over is moved up here. But of course, the version of Substitute is amazing. Summertime Blues is just incredible. Probably the best version of it. Although the version at Live at Hull is really good. Now, what's interesting is Live at Hull is mic'd up and mixed pretty well. They did say the bass was missing or something for many years, but now it's been restored. And that album is really good. Keith Moon is sounding good for the most part on Live at Hull, which was just maybe a few days after this or before this or something, but can't remember. But it is fucking killer, and in a totally different way from how this album is killer. You got to hear Live at Hull. It's got all the power and intensity and energy of this album, but in some ways it's almost like it's tighter than this album. Now, the Who really aren't tight, you guys, but for how erratic the Who are and how just insane they all are, they're really hella tight here, you guys, on this album. John Entwistle's funky bass and just popping strings is amazing. And Pete, I think he's playing an SG here, not a Strat. It just sounds fucking insane, you guys. And of course, Keith Moon is just incomparable. I mean, he's amazing. He's inexplicable, you guys. He's amazing. My Generation and Magic Bus, both killer. I think the My Generation is too long, but I kind of dig it. I understand it. And, but then, of course, the 1996, with all the songs added. Can't Explain, which is killer. Fortune Teller, which is awesome. Tattoo, killer, you guys. Dude, Happy Jack Substitute, I'm a Boy. It's rad. It starts to fall apart a little in the middle. You know, the version here of A Quick One ain't that great, but it's still pretty fucking good. Amazing Journey Sparks. They cut into all this Tommy shit, you know. Summertime Blues, Shaking All Over, pretty much intact from the first album. You know, dude, it's killer, you guys. There's so many versions. I'm sorry if I get confused. 2001, there's a version, you know. They're just great songs they play. Better than The Who on vinyl, on in the studio. Let's be honest here. I wish if they could go back to the 60s and record The Who live and mic them up, you know, but they were so erratic with Keith Moon, you know, and making a lot of mistakes and shit. And I guess they had to wait, you know, till 1970, you know, before just all that energy of Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, all those great bands. And then, of course, The Who locked in with that, and they got better, and they got tighter, and they got incredible. I would have to say this is one of the most amazing, greatest albums ever recorded. And it's almost like I consider this one of The Who's studio albums, you guys. Because when I first heard Live at Leeds, you really couldn't hear the crowd. It was almost like you were listening to a studio album, that old version. But then, you know, the 1996 or 94 or whatever it was version, you could hear the crowd more, and it became a live album. You know, but still, they're so good here, you guys, all over the place. And really, if you listen to Who bootlegs, they are really good sometimes, you guys. But usually no, you know, Keith Moon's usually drunk, or, you know, Pete's on acid, or they're all high on something. And usually The Who just aren't that good, you guys, at all. You know, if you're at the gig and you're drunk and you're stoned and it's super loud, you're going to love The Who, dude. You're going to just be like, fuck, this is amazing. You know, you're going to see the lights flashing and, you know, you're all high. You're not going to judge them, but they're not as good or as tight as like Deep Purple or Led Zeppelin or any of that. Or they're certainly not as good as Jethro Tull or a lot of bands. But The Who have some type of animal energy, some demonic possession that those bands don't have. I swear to God, you guys, The Who are my favorite band because there's something about this period from like 1968 to 1972 where they are just possessed, even if it is cleaned up in the studio or mic'd up properly or mixed properly. I don't care. There's some high energy about The Who that is fucking amazing that Led Zeppelin will never have and Deep Purple will never have, or those other bands just cannot bottle the lightning like The Who can. But I definitely recommend, if you're 23 years old today and you were born in 2000, buy The Who Live at Leeds, you guys. Get into all The Who and appreciate even the early Who. You know, they were trying. Kit Lambert didn't know what he was fucking doing, but Shel Talmy sure did. He captures The Who on that first album. Those albums, The Who, Sell Out, and Tommy, are very interesting in terms of art, you know, like a Brian Wilson kind of thing. They're nothing like The Who live, but like the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, kind of in that way, like the Beatles' Rubber Soul or Revolver. The Who are right there making two amazing albums that are artistic, you know, artsy fartsy, amazing albums, The Who, Sell Out, and Tommy. But they are nothing like The Who live, you guys. The Who live is Live at Leeds and Live at Hull, maybe Live at Woodstock and all that shit. That is the real Who, you guys. And I want you to buy these albums. You tell them that Clark the Shark, the Wolfman Jack on crack, he sent you to buy The Who and get into The Who. And make this, love The Who, dude. Make this your favorite band. It's my favorite band, you guys, The Who. I fucking love just the pure rock and roll acumen and spirit of Pete Townsend. I mean, he's not that good on guitar, but sometimes when you listen to Pete, it's like he's Jimi Hendrix or Eric Clapton. He's so good. He's fucking amazing. And he pulls miracle guitar solos out of nowhere. I don't know how he does it, because I know in my heart that Pete isn't that good on guitar. But then you hear Tommy with that acoustic, how fast he's playing, and you're like, fuck, this guy really is good. The Who really are good. You hear Pete and Keith playing the way Keith plays drums on Tommy and here on Live at Leeds and Who's Next. And you're like, fuck, dude, it is true. Keith Moon really is the greatest drummer in the world. You know, he really isn't, you guys. He's not Bill Bruford. He's not Carl Palmer. He's not Bobby Caldwell. But he has something those guys don't got, you guys. I swear to God. Keith Moon has something that John Bonham does not have. It's insane. And you will discover that on Live at Leeds, you guys. You'll discover it on Who's Next and Quadrophenia and Tommy. You will discover how great Keith Moon is. He was fucking amazing. But imagine how great he would have been if he didn't drink, if he worked out in the gym. You know, dude, try to imagine how amazing Keith would have been, but that would not have been Keith Moon, you guys. He was not meant to live long. I'm sorry, it's just true. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say that Keith Moon is in heaven. He wasn't meant to go to heaven, you guys, just like Zappa. But he was meant to be here on our earth for a little while, for a short time, and rock the fucking shit out of all of us, baby. I'm Clark the Shark, and you just heard the word, the testimony, the gospel, and the only review of this heavy, atmospheric, hard-rocking, amazing drumming, amazing guitar, amazing bass from John Entwistle, the absolute most funkiest popping strings, twangy bass in one speaker, you guys, that you will ever hear. This is the greatest bass playing, you guys. Right here. And Lemmy from Motorhead said John Entwistle is the greatest bassist, and he wasn't kidding. And Geddy Lee says that too, you guys. John fucking Entwistle, amazing. The Who, Live at Leeds, amazing. My favorite band, The Who. God bless Keith Moon, man. Fuck, what a drummer. What a band. Buy this album, you guys. Tell them Clark the Shark sent you. It's fucking amazing. Live at Leeds, 1970, The Who. Get this fucking album, you guys. I swear to God. You've got to own this. You've got to own it and listen to it. Listen to it on Sacked. Listen to it. Separate each fucking thing and listen to the drumming. Isolate the guitar, the bass. You gotta fucking listen to this shit. I'm out of here, people. Peace.